集合写真なんですけれども、
あ、
清水さんの画面で撮りますか？
ちょっと僕バタバタするので、
じゃあ、こちらでやりま
で
しょうか。
きれば、はい、お願いできる
はい、
と嬉しいです。
わかり
申し訳
ました。は
ないです。
い、
すいません。
そうですね。ちょっとオフにしてます。
岡本さん。
はい。
ライブうまくいってるみたいですね。
はい、いってます。バッチリです。
はい、OK です。
ありがとうございます。
Hello, Abdul Manan. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good afternoon. This is Mario Lopez. I'll be the moderator for today.
Okay.
I would just like to know if you have some slides for today's presentation.
Okay, I will share by email, yeah?
It's okay. You can just do them from your computer.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.はい、どうぞ。
清水さん、関さんとあやめさん、まだ入ってないですかね、視聴者の。関先生と。
まだ入ってないです。先ほどから確認してますけど、まだ来られてないです。
そうですね、まだですね。
Hello, good morning, good afternoon to Yini. Are you there? Hello, Yini. Are you there online?
Hello, this is Yenny.
Oh, hello. Good morning. Good afternoon. This is Mario Lopez. I'll be the moderator for today. Could I just ask you if you will be using slides?
No, I have no slides.
No slides. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. So it's now already 1:20. So we would like to start the symposium. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are quite excited to join this symposium on COVID-19 in Southeast Asia. This symposium is organized by the Japan Society for Southeast Asian Studies in collaboration with Center for Southeast Asian Studies, Kyoto University, Japan. So that's why I'll make a brief introduction on this society for the speakers, because the speakers are from Southeast Asian countries and they don't know much about this society. And also we have non-members of the society. They are listening or watching this symposium through the YouTube streaming. That is why I'll make a brief introduction on this society. This society was established in 1966, mainly focusing on Southeast Asian history at first. So now the society is more than 50 years old. But with the development of the society, the membership has become bigger and bigger and more diverse. And now we have more than 500 members comprised of different academic backgrounds or disciplines such as history, anthropology, politics, economy, and ecologies. And we hold a large conference every year and organize a symposium as its part. And each year we chose widely discussed issues on what is taking place in Southeast Asia or what is taking place on Southeast Asia or on Southeast Asian studies. These are chosen as the theme for annual symposiums. And the committee member of the symposium are Ksaka-san, Iwai-san, Nissan, and I. And we chose the symposium topic this year. And it is quite natural, or should I say, it is a must to choose the widespread pandemic COVID-19 as the main theme of this symposium this year. And today, it's quite lucky, we successfully invite distinguished journalists from 5 countries in Southeast Asia. Marites-san from the Philippines, and Tashini-san from Malaysia, Yeni-san from Myanmar, and Abdul Manan-san from Indonesia, and Pravit-san from Thailand. All are frontline distinguished journalists covering all the issues that are taking place in their own countries or abroad. And luckily also we hold this symposium online. That's why the Japan Society don't need to pay the airfare or accommodation fee for them. That's why we can invite all these distinguished scholars rather cheaply. And they are frontline journalists reporting on the pandemic in each country. And if you read their downloadable papers from our website, we can learn about their serious hardships in reporting and also the hardship about their own survival as journalists. And also we have great discussions today. And some of them are from this society and some of them are not. And they are all specialists on the 5 countries. Seki Sensei on the Philippines and Suzuki Sensei on Malaysia, Nakani Sensei on Myanmar, Kamara Sensei on Indonesia, and Shiani-san from Italy, and he's working on Thailand. So I think it's quite obvious that this symposium is going to be quite exciting, and it is a really good opportunity for us, all of us all, to learn the current pandemic situation in 5 countries in Southeast Asia. So I think you can all enjoy this symposium. So now I'll ask Mario-san from Center for Southeast Asian Studies to give the introductory situation of the pandemic and also the process of this symposium. So Mario-san, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Okamoto-san, for your introduction. Greetings to all of the participants for today's online webinar. My name is Mario Lopez. I'm a faculty member at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies here at Kyoto University. I'd like to thank all of the participants, also the commentators for accepting our request to join this session to share their experiences on reporting from their respective countries under the ongoing pandemic. In early March this year, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. And what started out as a localized outbreak in Wuhan, China, has spread across the globe to affect all of humanity. And as of this weekend, the 19th of December, 75 million people have been infected, with over 1.6 million confirmed dead. And the impact in some countries has unleashed some of the biggest public health crises in modern history. Now, at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, we were very concerned with how this impacted Southeast Asia, and we set up a response site in order to monitor and also share information from the region. It's not been spared from the infection, nor from the effects of this ongoing pandemic. And as a result of the deep global connections to the rest of the world, it's now experiencing what is could be said to be its worst economic, financial, and social crisis in decades. Many borders have closed. Also, human movement has been severely curtailed as well. Now, nations have reacted to outbreaks across and between countries through the imposition of curfews, partial and full lockdowns, and also the closing of borders, which have impeded human flows. But we should also remember that Southeast Asia is no stranger to pandemics historically, and also in contemporary times as well. In recent years, it's also been able to mobilize and coordinate very swift responses after experiences of for example, the 2003 SARS outbreak. Also, some countries such as Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia appear to have been successful in keeping down the rates of infection. However, the current crisis has made it clear that the varying levels of preparedness and vulnerabilities of healthcare systems and government responses has been very dynamic at many different levels. Now, in spite of the different responses that have been put in place, social distancing, the closure of public spaces, and also harsh punishments for violating isolation decrees, these have all highlighted an array of many different political responses. And some of these have impacted greatly on a region that is characterized by variegated economies, large informal sectors, disproportionate inequality, continual political instability, and also weak forms of governance. So the resulting pandemic has laid bare the challenges the region is facing, and also the capacity of states to manage the ongoing crisis, either individually or through cooperation. Now, in today's session, we set this up to engage in some of these issues, but from the perspective of those who have their fingers on the pulse in their respective nations, in particularly reporters who have been invited today to talk. Within the current fluid context of the pandemic, they have been on the front line, gathering and presenting insights on what their countries are experiencing. They have also asked many difficult questions under very trying conditions. How have states responded to the pandemic? What types of discourses have been formulated and mobilized to justify control and governance of communities? Also, what national and regional emergency measures, laws, provisions have been put in place, and particularly have they been proportional? And also another point here is what new technological regimes have come into play in the management and surveillance of populations, and what will be the long-term impact in terms of changing their behavior? Also, how have media responded to the corrosive effect of fake news, the hacking of media sites, and also threats against journalists as they try to report what's happening? So for this session, we will now be having short talks and also comments from 5 respected and very prominent reporters, as well as also commentators from the Japan Society for Southeast Asian Studies. All know their respective fields, all are very respected in the countries that they're working in, and they will share some of their thoughts on the issues today. We hope that our discussion will allow us to pull out both some of the diverging differences and also the shared issues that are playing out across Southeast Asia at this moment in time. We look forward to this session, and we look forward to the lively debate that we will have now. This session is a webinar, and it's brought to you in conjunction with the Japan Society for Southeast Asian Studies. It's also being streamed live on YouTube. So if you are watching online, can I please ask you to submit your questions by email following the instructions under the screen on the email address, which you will find in the YouTube channel. Also, a few other comments to make to everybody who's participating in this session today. For those of you who are members of the Southeast Asian Society, can I ask you to make sure that you set your videos to off and that you keep your mics muted at all times. Also, please make sure that your displayed Zoom username is written in Romanized, or also in Japanese script. And in case of disconnection, you may use the same Zoom link to enter this session. Also, if you have a question to ask to the speakers, we have a dedicated Q&A function as well. So if you have a question, please do not use the chat function, but use the Q&A function to ask questions. Please make sure that you state your name, your affiliation, and also the person you would like to direct your question to. So also, if you have these comments, please make sure, if you're on YouTube, to use the form which you will find on the channel as well. Again, please write your name and the person you would like to address your question to as well. Questions are to be addressed only in English. Now, before I pass over the session to the first speaker today, what I would like to do is to ask the main participants to switch on all of their cameras, because now we will be taking the obligatory Zoom picture. So that can I ask all participants who are online now to open your cameras? That's it, thank you very much. And I will now be taking a picture. So can I ask Abdul, Ini, Nakanishi-san, if you are there, can I ask everybody to open their, that's it, thank you very much. Kusaka-san, are you there as well? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna now take a screenshot, so I'll do this a couple of times. So can I have everybody smiling, please? Okay, thank you. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and one more if you don't mind. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much. Now, I would like to pass over to our first speaker. Today's first speaker will be Marites Fituk. So Marites, if you are there, I will now switch off my mic and I will pass over to you. Thank you very much.
Hi. Hi, I'm Marites. Can you see me? Hello?
Yes, we can see you. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to the organizers for putting this symposium today, gathering us here. And let me share with you some slides. We were asked to give a bird's eye view first of the pandemic situation in the Philippines and then the response of our government. So now let me share my slides. Okay, can you see the big slides? Okay.
Yes.
So this is my theme is slow virus response, but quick right suppression in the Philippine COVID experience. So first, an overview. So do I press now slideshow? Okay. You know, the Philippines, just to give an overview, we have the second most number of cases in Southeast Asia, next to Indonesia. But if you check the number of deaths per 1 million population, we have the highest at 80, followed by Indonesia. In terms of testing, we're quite behind Singapore, which is the first in terms of testing out of 1 million population, they've tested the most number of people, then followed by Malaysia. Now in the Philippines, we have below 2,000 cases, new cases a day, which is an improvement, but our health authorities expect it to surge after the holidays, because as you know, in the Philippines, we have the longest Christmas holiday season, and people now are out in the malls, people are gathering despite very strict health protocols. So now, I would like to answer the question of why we are in this sorry state, why the Philippines failed in its coronavirus strategy. So I'll give you first the broad answers. Basically, it's very late and very slow response. Add this to the pre-existing condition of a very poor public health system. Can you imagine in March of this year, we only had one laboratory for testing. You could imagine how slow and how frustrating it was for people to get tested. But fortunately, this has improved because of help from the private sector. And I will talk about this later. And then, of course, contact tracing. This is our weakest link. I'll just go broadly over the reasons. And incompetent leadership from our president to the health secretary, and the stress on controlling the people rather than the virus. And because of this, there has been a reliance on the military instead of health experts, epidemiologists to lead the anti-COVID-19 program. So let me just talk to you first about our contact tracing, our strategy to defeat COVID-19. The government has repeatedly said that we have the 3 T's, which is test, trace, and treat. And as I said earlier, tracing is the weakest part. According to a study by economists from the University of the Philippines, our contact tracing system reaches only 4 to 5 people, whereas the international standard is 30 to 37 for urban areas and 25 to 30 for rural areas. But during his weekly television addresses, because every week the president speaks to the nation, he hardly mentioned contact tracing, maybe twice or thrice, because it's not a priority. Also, we have existing village or barangay health workers all over the country, but the Department of Health did not mobilize them and rely on them for contact tracing. So we missed an opportunity. In Thailand, I read about how the Thai government mobilized its community health workers as part of its contact tracing effort. Now, just to give you a timeline on how our government arrived at this response, just let's go back a little bit in time. So this was in February 3, when the virus was starting to already spread, and the president downplayed this global threat. As you can see, he said that there's really nothing to worry about. I assure you, even without the vaccines, this will just die a natural death. This was in February. So that was the tone of our leadership. And then in February 14, this was 2 weeks after we had the first coronavirus death outside China, which is in the Philippines. Our president said, let's go and travel. Let's go around the country, because he was worried about the impact of the virus on tourism. So you see that there was no sense of urgency at the time, and there was no deep understanding of what the virus was all about, despite our experience with SARS many, many years ago. And after this, the president promoted tourism, the same month in February 27, our health secretary gave a media briefing, and he said, the Philippines is a model country in fighting COVID-19. We were surprised because the virus had already entered the country, but there was no local transmission yet at the time. And February 27 was when Duque announced that we were a model country. Okay. And then, again, we already were in March. This was in March 9. The president gave a speech to a gathering of about 1,000 mayors packed in an air-conditioned hall in a hotel. This was not canceled, despite the report of the first case of local transmission in March 6. So the president told the mayors, oh, it doesn't matter, because if it's not your time to go, 5 million handshakes won't give you the coronavirus. The context is his security aides were advising him not to shake hands, but he instead dismissed this, saying, there's nothing to worry about. that's March 9, when we, as I said earlier, we already had local community transmission. And then all of a sudden, in mid-March, the president seemed to have awakened or jolted because the virus was spreading fast. And then this began the longest and most stringent lockdown in Asia. And I will just cite a few of the indicators of the emphasis on control of the people rather than of the virus. So he ordered, this was really quite shocking, he ordered the policemen to shoot down quarantine violators because we're all supposed to be at home and they had curfew and we should only go out during essential trips, but some were caught and at least one was shot by the police. And others, who were trying to look for food or try to make a living, thousands were arrested. And as I said here, more than those who were tested. And then we had a chilling effect because the law enforcement authorities started to clamp down on social media. For example, an artist in Cebu who posted a very sarcastic remark on Cebu as the epicenter in the whole solar system. It was meant to be a sarcastic remark, but she was arrested and detained, I think, for a night or two. Even overseas, a Filipino worker in Taiwan was harassed because she posted on Facebook critical posts of the president. And our labor attaché asked Taiwanese government to deport her, but Taiwan rejected and they said they respect freedom of speech. So all these were happening. And then in our own Congress, this was, I think, in July when we were still in lockdown, the Congress shut down the largest TV network in the Philippines for political reasons. Duterte has always disliked ABS-CBN because he perceives it to be critical of his administration. This is a press freedom issue, and ABS-CBN News, they have now shifted to digital, but they have closed down more than 24 bureaus all over the Philippines. So there's a vacuum now in news coverage of local communities. And then after this, I think May was the shutdown of ABS-CBN. And then in July, Congress passed this very strict anti-terror law, which allows the arrest of citizens who express dissent. And it also gave powers to a civilian body, not the courts, to determine who are the terrorists. This law has been challenged. It's still pending in our Supreme Court. Now I will talk a bit more about the limits to reporting during the pandemic. As I think in other Southeast Asian countries, we relied on virtual briefings. And I asked two young reporters who are always attending the briefings, and they say it's very difficult to ask follow-up questions or to even get the attention of the health officials because this is all online. You send your questions in advance and they can easily ignore it. And then if not, you can't follow up questions. And so it's very difficult to get deeper into the data. But the bright spot is that we have academics, researchers who have been studying the data given by the Department of Health, and they have been helping reporters analyze this, and they have also been making their studies public. So that's now not really a new, but a very productive partnership between the academe, researchers, and journalists. And now I'd like to zoom out away from the Philippines and look at the region as what you're doing today, gathering us, because the pandemic is, of course, a global threat. And with it comes disinformation. And it would be helpful for us in Southeast Asia to fight disinformation, not only the media, but together with civil society groups and academics, especially those that are widely shared on social media, those that come from our leaders as well as leaders of other countries. And as Southeast Asia is going through this unprecedented crisis, it would be helpful also for us to share and compare experiences so that we learn lessons from each other. At least now this is happening in a few webinars, and I find this very helpful. Also, it would be valuable to learn more about the success stories of other countries in Southeast Asia in managing the pandemic. And also, how are our neighbors coping? What is the effect, as Mario said earlier, on the inequity, maybe on social and economic issues? Because the reporting on the pandemic is not just on the health aspect, but also on its impact on the economy and on other social problems. And finally, I think we in Southeast Asia, we need to go out of our insular mindsets, just thinking of our countries, and let's do regional reporting together or cross-border reporting. This would be a deeper way to get to know our neighbors. Already, some publications are doing this, like Tempo and Malaysia Kini. And that's why in times of adversity, we have an opportunity. And this is one of them, a chance for us, our colleagues in Southeast Asia, to work together. And one issue that's so current, it lends itself to regional reporting, is the COVID-19 vaccine, including steps taken by ASEAN to help the region gain access to these vials of hope, and how multilateralism is helping resolve the problems brought by the pandemic. For us in the Philippines, we are still in our infancy stage when it comes to cross-border reporting with ASEAN countries. But with the help now of the Japan-based Sasakawa Foundation, which is actively promoting cross-border reporting in ASEAN, we hope we will be more active in this kind of journalism and contribute to a meaningful dialogue in this diverse part of the world. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to our discussion.
岡本さん、声が聞こえません。
そっちで行こうか。I'm sorry. I'm mute. Thank you very much, Marita-san, for a wonderful presentation. Actually, as you mentioned, this is a good opportunity to learn together what is going on, tackling the pandemic in Southeast Asia, and your presentation is quite so provoking. So now I'll ask Seki Sensei from Hiroshima University to respond to her talk. He's an anthropologist, and he has been working on the Philippines for such a long time. So Seki Sensei, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marita-san, for your informative talk. I'm Koki Seki. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Koki Seki from Hiroshima University. Can you see the screen? Can you see the screen? Okay. So I will just make a brief comment for Marita-san's talk. Okay, so I just prepared a few, one or two slides. I hope you can see. So Marita-san's talk clearly suggests that the current war on corona in the Philippines should be considered as a continuation or extension of the war on drugs under President Duterte's administration. Its reliance on the retired generals rather than epidemiologists for the control of the spread of corona is quite reflective of this fact. and suggests a gloomy scenario for the future. The style of government by Duterte is characterized by Nicole Curato, a sociologist, as quote unquote penal populism. That is a political style that builds on collective sentiments of fear and demands for punitive politics, which results in the construction of antagonism between quote unquote citizens versus hardened criminals, or so-called the scum of society. Strict community quarantine in the Philippines would similarly create the moral divide between self-restraining citizens and irresponsible others who are to be blamed for the risk of viral spread. With this as a background, the important question is how would the style of government under a war on drugs add new color to the war on corona? Or inversely, are there any possibilities that the war on corona might influence, change, or even reconstitute the style of the war on drugs in the future? As an anthropologist, I am more interested in how interpersonal relationships in communities or sociality in general has been affected by this pandemic. Regarding this point,
先生, for comments, 1 minute left.
1 minute. Okay, I will be quick. Okay, so regarding this point, Anna Warburg and Stefan Jensen argue that a certain emotion that can be termed ambiguous fear has been prevalent among the urban poor communities in Metro Manila as a result of the ongoing war on drugs. Ambiguous fear, according to Warburg and Jensen, is the fear and anxiety manifested with a sense of uncertainty and unpredictability, as no one knows who could be the next target of a police operation. Even though you are sure of your innocence, you are not sure that you will be left unharmed by police violence. This ambiguous fear reconfigures social and moral orders among the people through the creation of deep mistrust among them. Whereas they used to be tied with the norm of pakikisama, or the ability of getting along among neighbors. Ambiguous fear can be an appropriate concept to analyze the situation of a pandemic, since it also creates the situation of uncertainty where no one knows who could be targeted and blamed as a irresponsible spreader of the virus. When considering how penal populism can be divisive and affect the people's sociality under the war on corona, it is interesting to know Kusaka-san's discussion about Duterte's control of the virus, termed as disciplinary quarantine, one that is premised on a moral dichotomy between good citizens who abide by strict regulations and undisciplined evil others, or so-called pasaway, who endanger the nation, on the other hand. Such disciplinary quarantine might result in the deepening of so-called ambiguous fear, which can then severely degrade community trust. Kusaka-san, however, also points out that various practices of mutuality could possibly
関先生、タイムアップです。
はい、あと数行で終わります。はい。Various practices of mutuality could possibly create a leeway, even under a depressingly strict community quarantine. As an example of these practices of mutuality, Kusaka-san pointed out that it is observed that the people, including street-level officials, started to ignore or overlook various violations of curfew and other restrictions by the residents, and also the practices such as activating street peddling and online bartering to support others' lives. Whether or not, sorry, I forgot. Whether or not these practices of mutuality can have potential to reconfigure the sociality and communal trust, which according to some literature have been severely damaged under the war on drugs, should be posed as another important question. Thank you very much. And this is references cited. And thank you very much. That's all from me.
So thank you, Sensei. Thank you very much for very difficult comments to answer, but I will ask Marites-san to respond to his questions and comments in 1 minute. So Marites-san, could you respond to his comments?
Yes, wow, they're difficult to respond to. But
sorry,
I was just thinking about will the question, one of the questions posed by Sensei was, will the style of government, the war versus the virus, influence the war on drugs? I think it's the other way around. The war on drugs influence, which you also mentioned, influence the war versus the virus. The government used the same lens of going after suspected drug users in trying to control the virus. But this has not been successful because we are only in the phase of mitigating the risks. We have not controlled the virus unlike other countries. Then the second interesting point is about communal trust, the trust of the community and their ambiguous fear. You know, what's interesting is that there was a survey done after, I think after the lockdown or in the midst of the strict lockdown. It showed that Duterte remains very popular, more than 90% satisfactory or popularity rating. And it really was a puzzle. So we discussed this among colleagues, and I also asked around. And it was because during the lockdown, Duterte ordered the local governments to give cash dole-outs to the communities. And many were able to receive these cash dole-outs, which it was a help to make them survive. It was called ayuda, meaning help, coming from the word's Spanish word. So that's why they remained, the image of Duterte was somebody who was caring for the poor people because of the cash dole-outs, which he directed the local governments to give. And I think the people here also react to fear. So if there is fear and then there is compliance, and then because there is compliance, there is an implicit trust of the leader. So it's quite it's a fascinating subject for discussion. And maybe if you come to the Philippines, Sensei, you can do research here on the communities and how they were impacted by the virus and why they have kept their trust in the president. Although one phenomenon which came out of the pandemic is some local mayors, governors performed very well because they were able to respond decisively to their constituents. However, the national government had to say that, yes, you lead this, but we will supervise you. So there was still a control from the national government. So it's also a very interesting relationship, especially now that the government's now talking about vaccines. They've centralized it to the national government, but there are mayors and governors who want to be able to order the vaccines themselves and be able to bring this to their constituents. And national government said they will enter into an agreement with these local mayors and governors, and then enter into agreement with the manufacturer into a tripartite agreement so that they will be able to participate and buy vaccines. But that's still for the medium term, I think. So thank you for your comments, Sensei.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marites and Seki-san. So maybe we can have a discussion later after all the speakers have talked. We have still general discussion time allocation. So let's talk later. So now we move on to the second speaker. Second report is from Malaysia, and the speaker is Tashni Sumaran-san from the South China Morning Post. So I will invite Tashni-san now. Tashni-san, are you there?
Here, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, so thank you very much for coming. Okay, so please start.
Okay, well, first, thank you so much for the invite. I'm just going to briefly go through some of the events that have happened in Malaysia this past year. It's been quite tumultuous. But firstly, can everyone hear me all right? Is the audio okay? Great, thank you so much. So it's been a very, very tumultuous year for Malaysia, not just in terms of the coronavirus, but also in terms of politics, right? And hang on, let me just open up I prepared some very basic slides, but they are very basic, so you may or may not want to put these up on the screen. So the theme for Malaysia this year has absolutely been breakneck speeds. COVID entered our shores, I think in January. It was extremely manageable up till late February, early March, when there was a gathering, a large religious gathering that saw numbers quickly increase and relatively increase, because now we're recording thousands of cases a day. And this increase happened at the same time as a political coup where the previous ruling coalition, Pakatan Harapan, sort of cannibalized itself with the exit of some of its key members, causing it to lose parliamentary majority. Our then prime minister resigned, and then the nation's king chose a new prime minister who he believed would be able to command the confidence of the majority of the lower house of parliament. Then soon after, because of these COVID numbers, there was a national lockdown or movement control order. During this time, businesses were shuttered, so no economic activity went on. And as we all know, when this happens, the populace becomes restive. So that led to increasing xenophobia, mostly targeted at migrants and refugees. There was also a clampdown on civil liberties. There was a lot of pushback from state apparatus against free speech activists. I think Amnesty Malaysia did a very extensive campaign on this. It also, the lockdown, COVID, it also underscored economic inequalities, as when we started to move to e-learning, we saw that a lot of children, even living in urban areas, didn't have the devices or the internet connection necessary to access e-learning. There was extensive use of the police to crack down on people breaching the lockdown, the quarantine order, not wearing their masks properly. But at the same time, there was a lot of criticism because there was a perceived double standard, because politicians had carried on meetings, birthday parties, that sort of thing, and had not received any fines or minor fines, nominal fines. More recently, there was an attempt by the Prime Minister to enforce a state of emergency, which did not go through. There was the tabling of the 2021 federal budget, which really outlined how close the ruling coalition's parliamentary majority is. It was 111 votes to 109, so that's very, very tight. And there was one abstention, if I'm not mistaken. And to add sort of insult to injury, Selangor, which is Malaysia's richest state, saw water cuts, which is quite ironic during a pandemic because you want to be able to wash your hands. So I'm going to talk about three of the main issues that I encountered while I was reporting on the pandemic here, right? So the first one was the targeting of refugees and migrant workers. Thank you. The targeting of refugees and migrant workers. So we saw immigration crackdowns, which led to hundreds of migrant workers and some asylum seekers and of course some documented workers, not just undocumented, being scooped up and placed in detention centers, There were fatalities. These detention centers were overcrowded, and civil society was not allowed to visit or inspect these detention centers. And the ruling then given by the government was that if these migrants have COVID, we will treat them and send them back. And if they don't, we will just deport them immediately, which of course, as we all know, makes no sense because you can be asymptomatic or it can take a while for the symptoms to express themselves. So you may be potentially exporting the virus to other countries. There was also an increase in hate speech directed at refugees, particularly the Rohingya from Myanmar, because there were some incidents of a few arriving on boats, and there was a lot of issues with the threats to turn them back and who is responsible. And because the populace, I think, was facing such dire economic straits at the time, it became very easy to turn the narrative towards a situation where you look at these foreigners and go, well, you're taking these resources that I need, ignoring the fact that we are, one, all in this together. Any kind of community transmission is a community transmission, right? It doesn't matter, the virus doesn't discriminate. And that looking after migrant workers who are already facing quite difficult situations in Malaysia would limit the spread of the virus, as we saw in Singapore with the overcrowded dorms. If they had practiced good OSH from the start, as same with Malaysia, you would see, clusters not form in these areas. My own personal experience, on May Day, Labor Day, there was an immigration raid in a red zone in Kuala Lumpur, and there were some journalists there reporting on the matter. And I was actually called in for questioning because I had said that, pointed out human rights violations, and I had called some sources who were within the area in the flats that were raided. And the police asked me to, reveal my sources and what was my definition of a human rights violation, this sort of thing, which leads me to my second point, which is that of civil liberties at risk. So let me just pull up my, hang on, so sorry. Here we go. I'm just going to try and give you a brief list of some of the civil liberties that have faced regression. So we've got activists, opposition leaders, and journalists investigated under a bunch of laws to do with public order, insult, or alleged disinformation. So we've got the lawyer Ambiga, we've got an anti-corruption advocate named Cynthia, a radio personality named Patrick of all things, a refugee rights activist named Heidi Kwa, several opposition parliamentarians, a student activist, and several reporters. I think most notable was broadcaster Al Jazeera, who did a documentary on migrants under lockdown. And it ended up in sort of the government asking them to apologize for this misinformation, the migrant source who they had interviewed being deported after police questioning and that sort of thing. The reporters received a lot of online sort of violence and cyber violence directed at them, trying to force them off social media. And of course, Al Jazeera stood by their story. But the amount of blowback they got from it, from the ruling, from the administration, created a chilling effect on freedom of speech, I think. And we can see that in a lot of other circumstances as well. I think in the middle of the year, a retiree, a pensioner from one of the East Coast states was fined several thousand ringgit because he had insulted our health minister on Facebook. So he had to come all the way to Kuala Lumpur for his court date. And he was like, you know what, just fine me because I can't afford to be traveling back and forth. So then you don't even have the access to remedy. So recently, Civicus, the Civil Society Alliance, listed Malaysia as an obstructed space, saying that the government had used the pandemic as a pretext to restrict civic spaces, and that because of the lockdown, civil society had not been able to push back or mobilize because they can't gather, yeah? They also defended use of the Colonial Era Sedition Act, saying that it was important for public harmony. The government said they were not able to debate the National Human Rights Commission's annual report in Parliament. let me see. Yeah, and from the people themselves, petitions asking for the deportation of refugees and asylum seekers came up. Activists were threatened with violence. A friend of mine who deals with refugees was actually told to go hang herself on social media. Yeah, so it was a very
For your
tense time.
presentation, 5 minutes left.
Thank you. Okay. And then the final matter that I would like to look at, which leads on from both the oppression of minority groups and economic precarity, which is brought on by the lockdown, is that of women and children. So let's see, unpaid care work is very common in Malaysia, like access to daycares for working women is very difficult. Even though we have a high number of female graduates, there's a low number of re-entry into the workforce, usually after they give birth. It is not illegal to discriminate based on pregnancy or motherhood, or, you know, so there's no maternity, there's insufficient maternity leave, there's no paternity leave. These are all gaps sort of in our system, and never mind that during the lockdown, women were overrepresented in the industries that were heavily impacted. There were also children, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Because I'm very passionate about this, there are also children in urban areas, the urban poor, who were unable to access e-learning because they didn't have internet connections, or the whole family shared one device. They had to wait for their parents to give them their smartphone so they could access school. There was one case in Sabah where a girl wanted to sit for her entrance exams, and she actually had to climb a tree to get to proper internet access. And of course, then she was praised for her resilience. And some people, of course, doubted her, saying, are you making this up for sort of social media clout? But the fact stands that children should not have to do this to access sort of an even playing field. Yes, you can praise someone for being resilient, but children shouldn't have to be. There was an increase in domestic violence. I think a 50% increase in women seeking access to safe abortions also happened. And I think most notably, the government's initial response to this sort of issue seemed to not take it very seriously. In a series of infographics released earlier this year, they suggested women dress nicely at home and speak to their partner in a cute voice, similar to the cartoon character Doraemon, verbatim Doraemon, so as to not, upset their husbands. And of course, this is victim blaming. This is absolutely wrong. Later on in the budget, the government allocated several million ringgit to support centers, and said that we are very worried about this situation. But women's groups have voiced that they're concerned that the endowment will not be used effectively. So those three things, in my opinion, have made covering the COVID pandemic in Malaysia sort of a minefield, in that you want to raise these issues about people sort of caught at the margins, right? Refugees, asylum seekers, migrant workers, women, children. But because of this pushback against civil liberties, as well as the movement control order, making it hard for us to go out and just interview people or see what circumstances are, journalists have faced that stumbling block of having to navigate not just a slightly unfriendly administration, but also just the logistics of speaking to people who already maybe don't have the kind of internet access that all of us are very privileged to enjoy. We can Zoom each other and find out what's going on, but to do field research now, to write your story, it becomes a much larger challenge for reporters. Okay, so I think I have about 1 or 2 minutes left, but I think I'll wind up now, and maybe we can take questions for longer if anyone likes, or we can move straight to the discussion. Yep, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, Tashanis, thank you very much for your interesting talk, but under the very sad situation. So the wife should use a very sweet voice like Doraemon?
Yes, that was exactly the phrase.
But we can really understand. So the space for the civil society is seriously narrowing now in Malaysia under the pandemic situation as a pretext. Thank you very much for your talk. So now I'll ask Suzuki Ayame-san to make a comment for her talk. And she's a specialist on Malaysian politics. Actually, she is now in the Philippines, but this is because online symposium, that's why she can give a talk from the Philippines. So now, Ayame-san, please start.
Thank you very much, Tashini-san and Okamoto-san. Tashini, your update on Malaysia was very insightful. Thank you. I'd like to focus on 3 topics as my response. One is selective protection by the state. COVID-19 clearly showed us that the state remains the core provider of protection. I have to confess that before I read your paper, I tended to think that the Malaysian state's response, especially under the first round of MCO, was pretty effective because the Prihatin, the financial package, was quite comprehensive, and then the government, at least for a certain duration, could flatten the curve. Maybe things look pretty good because most probably because I was in Manila also. Yet you rightly pointed out that the state's response was not sufficiently directed at the marginalized groups, such as migrants, refugees, women, and children. And it is not really surprising given the decades-long attitudes of the Malaysian government on the rights and welfare of these groups, though. However, if you look at Singapore, the government now tries to change its attitude toward the migrant workers by sending a very clear message to them to appreciate their contribution and then also welcome them as a part of the community. It looks like this COVID-19, the unprecedented health crisis, prompted the Singaporeans, or at least the Singaporean government, to change the attitude and mindset about the marginalized groups, especially the migrant workers. Now, my question is this: can you foresee a similar change in Malaysia? And if not, why? My second point.
Sorry.
Can I just, I may just
sure,
finish.
Please, yes.
Now, next slide, please. Thank you. The second point is challenging the dominant narrative. I have an impression that there is a tendency in Malaysia to associate refugees and migrant workers, especially the undocumented ones, to criminality. And such a tendency, as you pointed out, was strengthened during the COVID, during lockdown. So there is a narrative of criminalization of refugees and undocumented migrant workers that dictates penalize them rather than protect them. And it looks like the state has been exercising its power in line with this dominant narrative. On the other hand, I recognize that there are numbers of journalists, artists, actors, and academics who try to challenge this discourse. And there are new innovative approaches, as you pointed out in your paper, by the NGOs going online and linking up people for the cause. Now, the COVID-19 prompts us to go more on digital, more online. Do you think there is a space for an innovative approach to effectively organize these forces and then challenge and eventually change the dominant discourse? And what role can media play in such a endeavor? Okay. The final point is checking the state's abuse of power. You discussed a number of serious cases of state's abuse of power during pandemic. However, I also see some lights in some of the episodes. One example is Muhyiddin government's failed attempt to declare emergency in October. It was quite obvious that this was motivated by political reasons to avoid the budget proposal being rejected and then eventually its government collapsing. But many critical articles were published, and the oppositions and citizens went firmly against it. With this, the king rejected the proposed emergency declaration. Now, what does this episode indicate? It may be that in Malaysia, the check against the government's abuse of power is somehow working. It may not be strong enough to discredit or discard the so-called backdoor government, but at least you can check the government from having a free hand. Now, my last question. What is your assessment on the role of media and civil society in checking the state's abuse of power under the current situation? That is it. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll just get into the answer. So I've been writing
Yeah,
notes.
Tashuni-san, but Tashuni-san, actually, I want to ask you to answer the question, but not now, but later, because the time is limited. We still have a lot of time after all the 5 speakers gave talks. So later, could you respond to her very interesting comments? Okay, so please prepare your response. You still have 30 minutes more. Okay, so I mentioned, thank you very much for very interesting comments with some insights from your own experiences in the Manila too, maybe. Okay, so now we move on to the third speakers. And the third speaker is from Myanmar, Yeni-san from Ilawadi online newspaper. And actually, I have ever visited this Ilawadi office, but I was quite amazed with their jobs on reporting the situations in Myanmar. Okay, now I'll invite Yeni-san for the talk. Yeni-san is here.
Yep.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
okay.
we hear you, yes.
Yep, I'm Yeni. I'm speaking from Yangon, Myanmar. First of all, I would like to talk about the COVID-19 outbreak in Myanmar briefly. So the situation here is currently growing steadily. Daily cases have reached around 1,200 and dozens of deaths in recent days. And they have increased from less than 10 per day in early August. So we have a 2 wave, first wave and the second wave. So during the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic, from late March to early August, Myanmar recorded just 360 cases and only 6 deaths. But on December 18, yesterday, Myanmar reported 114,198 COVID-19 cases, including 2,398 deaths and 92,916 recoveries, according to the Ministry of Health and Sports. So, however, the second wave of the COVID-19 has overwhelmed Myanmar's poor and the staff health infrastructure. So, effective as of 21st September 2020, the government announced stay-home orders for all the Yangon regions. So, stay-home restrictions include curfews, bans on public gatherings, and closure of public events, entertainment venues, and religious places. So I don't want to talk in detail of the restriction, but our failure to comply with this order will warrant action under the Prevention of Control and Communicable Diseases Law. It can be fined, not a lot, but you can be sent to the 1-month jail. So however, when the government has designated essential industries, which are exempted from stay-home orders during the lockdowns, Myanmar media were not on the essential industry list. So although several professionals are excluded from restrictions, such as doctors, emergency workers, and the police officer, the restrictions still apply to journalists. So most of the newsroom in Myanmar has been working remotely since COVID-19 emerged, and the most journalists in Yangon have been reporting from home as suggested by government. Yet for photojournalists and the video journalists to do their jobs, it's necessary to go into the field, and they have to go out from time to time. So whenever journalists are on the street, they are concerned that they will be arrested and charged under the Prevention and Control Communication Disease Law. So this restriction also stopped the work of the drivers of the newspaper delivery trucks. So as such, lockdown restrictions have impact on the media industry, particularly production of the newspaper, since all national newspapers are based in Yangon. So you can see this picture with the background of the press freedom in Myanmar. So in the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in Myanmar, authority took advantage of the pandemic by persecuting independent journalists, attempting to shut down the media sites, and further restriction public access to information. So on March 23, Myanmar Ministry of Home Affairs designated the ethnic armed groups called Arakan Army, AA, as a terrorist group under the Unlawful Association Act. The next day, the government issued an order to ban access to the number of independent news websites for supposedly spreading misinformation. So sites targeted include Development Media Group, DMG, Naranjara, Current News, Voice of Myanmar, and numbers of other independent news agencies, including some that operate in the local ethnic language. So on March 30, Ne Myo Lin, the editor-in-chief of Voice of Myanmar, a Mandalay-based news site, was arrested purportedly for interviewing with the AA member. He has been charged under the anti-terrorism laws. On the same evening, police raided office of Naranjara News in Sittwe, capital of Rakhine State. 3 reporters were detained and the editor went into hide. Police also searched the house of Laindit Zinwe, the editor-in-chief of Kitip Media, a Yangon-based independent news site, for publishing Voice of Myanmar interview with the AA member. So in response on Myanmar's harassment on the media, 215 civil society groups released their statement on April 2, expressing concern that government was taking advantage of corona pandemic in order to censor legitimate information. So again, Myanmar Press Council submit to a request to the military chief and the military control Ministry of Home Affairs to drop the case against the journalists and lift the restriction on the press in times of coronavirus. So later, Myanmar authority agree and dropped their accusation against the journalists and they allowed to reopen the new website. However, COVID-19 is a perfect storm for us. Lockdowns, restrictions have created economic uncertainty. So it has led to the steep decline in advertising revenue for news organizations. So with distribution system devastated, a major source of revenue has dramatically dropped, while fixed costs such as rents and staffing still have to be paid. Inevitably, many publications, including my organization, have decided to downsize and lay off. So my organization, the Irrawaddy, is relatively small. Before the COVID-19, we had 80 people, including journalists, correspondents, marketing staff, IT team, and administration staff. Now we have dropped down only to 14, so 50% cut. So currently, the Irrawaddy is turning our newsroom into the hybrid model, with some staff in the office, some working from the home, and some into the field. So since beginning of the first wave of COVID-19 at the end of the March, government introduced lockdowns and safety restriction. We have changed the way we produce news. Almost overnight, our newsroom has completely changed from physical ones to virtual ones. So unexpectedly, we have experienced a dramatic change to our workflows, including online conference, remote editing, and virtual brainstorms. So our newsroom has to forced to rely heavily on Zoom and Messenger to support working from home practices. Yet, at this point, I'm concerned that it makes us less creatively at the some level. So everyone knows that a journalist needs physical contact in a newsroom to debate ideas, share thoughts, and develop contents. And a journalist needs to go to the fields where the news are happening. Without the journalists on the ground, there is no high quality journalism. So furthermore, the health and safety of staff reporting on the ground also is another concern. So in late October, 10 journalists, including from Yangon, tested for COVID-19 positive, and 19 journalists were admitted to facility quarantine centers as they had a close contact history and secondary contact with the confirmed cases. So meanwhile, many journalists have said that they were challenged to secure their jobs.
For your presentation, 5 minutes left.
Yes, thank you. According to the press council, 18 journalists have lost their jobs in Yangon alone, and more than 300 journalists across the country has reached out the council for support. As such, we fear that these numbers are definitely increased by the end of year 2020. So when life is hard, many unemployed journalists earn in a living by selling foods in the street, online salesman, or became delivery man for the business despite a high risk outside. However, you will hear not only the bad news, but also good news here. Despite COVID-19 restriction, Myanmar authorities allow the journalists to report freely during the election periods. On the election day of 8 November, we observed and reported that millions of the people vote with the long line outside polling booths, which opened at 6 a.m. local time. So every journalists from the different regions of the Myanmar use Facebook live stream app through their mobile phones to cover election day for live reportings. We receive over 100,000 viewers for each broadcasting within that hour. Television broadcasts also show early ballots being counted in presence of candidates, election officer, and observers. On that day, the most popular election coverage was Bizima live broadcasting. Finally, in an interview with the Aung Hlathon, the Deputy Minister for Information and Sport Ministry, recognized that the role of independent news media is essential to democracy. So I would like to conclude with another good news. It's related with all of us. This is COVID-19 vaccines are on the way and they are coming. So Myanmar also is planning to purchase distribution and vaccination of COVID-19 supported by WHO and COVAX quota plan. In the meantime, of course, we still need to follow safety measure, practicing and implementing the health authority safety guidelines, properly wearing masks, often washing hands, and practicing social distancing are golden rules whenever we go outside to do our reporting. So I want to stop here, and I would like to hear forward the other discussion.
Thank you, Yeni-san, for a very important presentation. So your working staff has decreased by 50%. That's sad. Maybe after the recovery from the pandemic, you can hire more than 80 people, hopefully. Okay, now I move on to Nakanishi-san to make a response to his talk. He's a specialist in Myanmar politics, and he is a close friend with Yeni-san himself. Okay, now I'll pass the mic to Nakanishi-san, please.
Thank you, Okamoto-san. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. I'm Nakanishi. I would like to make a brief comment and give a question in the last. Okay. So I would like to share my slide. Okay. Just no. Sorry. Okay. Here. All right. Okay. Thank you. A very informative and insightful talk for Koyeni. I think my role here is to give some context to his talk about the current the situation of the relationship between the corona crisis and the journalism in Myanmar. If you look at the history of Myanmar, until 2011, the media in Myanmar was under very, very tight state control. The censorship agency checked every article of the newspapers and the journals. Under that circumstance, Myanmar watchers like me had to rely on Burmese exiles media, which were published outside of Myanmar. The Irrawaddy magazine was one of them, best one of them. The magazine has had high reputation for the quality of the reportings on everything about Myanmar, but especially the politics inside the Myanmar. It had provided us even the information about the inside the military politics at the time. With the political transition in 2011, the censorship was removed and the local journalism had emerged inside Myanmar. So I can say the local journalism in Myanmar is about just 10 years old. Actually, the journalists who I met in Myanmar are generally very young, 20s or 30s. And they are very energetic, but to be honest, a little less experienced. I think that they need more, some more time to develop their skills as professional journalists. But the surroundings around the current journalists may not wait for them to grow up because the development of the technology is so fast, and it can undermine the conditions for the development of the conventional media industry. And let me show you one graph slide. That this graph shows how much mobile cellular subscriptions have expanded in 4 countries: Myanmar, Thailand, the Philippines, and Indonesia. The orange line is Myanmar. You can see the rapid catch-up of Myanmar with other 3 countries after 2013. This drastic catch-up is nowadays 1 minute. Okay, give me 2 minutes more. Two more minutes. Sorry. They're called leapfrogging, which means that the new technology enables latecomers to jump up like a frog and catch up with the latest development standards in the specific field. Thanks to this leapfrogging effect, the people of Myanmar now went into the internet world suddenly and could access to large amounts of information with less infrastructure investment. Okay. Okay. So I think the current corona crisis accelerated this leapfrogging effect. More social communication, including news reports, have moved to online. Even though we get over the current crisis in the near future, I think we cannot expect everything goes back to before crisis. Cyberspace, internet will continue to be essential for the people's communications more than before. So that means the downsides of the internet, such as disinformation, fake news, and hate speeches, also can become more problematic. The those issues, as Koyeni already talked about, the Myanmar's government responses look a little bit inconsistent and weak. The government has not taken sufficient measures against them, and it sometimes downplays the freedom of expression, especially downplays the freedom of the press. They arbitrarily use various laws for interrupting or harassing activities of the journalist. As Koyenis mentioned, the disaster management law has been added to that government's legal weapons. The current under the current crisis. So, okay, so the question. I would like to ask you a question, Koyeni. This question is about your own experience as editor in chief of the Irrawaddy. Last year, you yourself were sued by the military under the telecommunications law. The reason was that the Irrawaddy's reporting on the conflict in Rakhine State was not neutral. So then after that, later, the military removed that lawsuit, but it can give chilling effect to the journalist. The chilling effect, I think it's the keywords to previous, the speakers also mentioned that effect. So one of my journalist friends in Myanmar told me that he is very careful when he publishes articles critical about three topics: the monks, Aung San Suu Kyi, and the military. Even though there is no censorship as there used to be before in Myanmar, such this arbitrary prosecution of the government can threaten the press freedom in Myanmar, I think. And so this is a quick question. Do you think that the corona crisis will bring more attention to the relationships between the journalism and the government in Myanmar? I would like you to share your sense with us from, based on your own experience as the editor of the Irrawaddy. Sorry that my comment is too long. This is my comment and question. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakanishi-san, for the comments, including the explanation about the background of the journalist situation or journalism situation in Myanmar. Yeni-san, maybe you could please respond his comments later, not now, because already time is already 10 minutes late than scheduled. So, okay, Nakanishi-san, thank you very much. So now we'll move on to the fourth speaker. And the fourth speaker is from Indonesia, Abdul Manan-san. He's the journalist from the Tempo magazine. This is one of the most authentic investigative journal in Indonesia. And he's also now the president of the Alliance of Independent Journalists, AJI, in Indonesia. Okay, now, Abdul Manan-san, are you ready? Maybe your mic is mute.
Hello, Abdul, we cannot hear you. Would you be able to check your mic? Thank you.
Yes. Okay. You can hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot to unmute my voice. Okay, thank you very much for organizer to inviting me to share about the media and journalist situation during the pandemic. And I see some speaker from other countries share about the COVID and how government handle the COVID. So I will brief about the latest situation about pandemic in Indonesia, but after that, I will to focus on the signal of regressive Indonesian freedom based on journalist experience and civil society. So you can see the number of COVID-19 case in Indonesia still high. For now, any more than 65,000 positive case and almost 20,000 death. And in international ranking, Indonesia, I think, is the highest number in Southeast Asia, number 20 in terms of the number of positive and in terms of the number of positive cases. And the issue now in Indonesia is the latest situation. The Sinovac vaccine come to Indonesia in 3 million doses in the first week of this month, and another 45 million bulk vaccine this month and the next month. But the problem, the Sinovac vaccine, until now the clinical trial, the finish of the clinical trial not yet finished, and we still don't know the efficacy rate of this vaccine. So, and that's why until now the National Agency of Drug and Food Control not yet released the emergency use of this vaccine. And the other issue with the vaccine, the COVID-19 in Indonesia, is about the how Indonesian government aware and prepare before the pandemic. This is part of the object of media criticism to government. We see media mostly criticize the government because most of Indonesian officials underestimate the pandemic. That's why they not prepare well after the pandemic coming to Indonesia since March. And also this why the Indonesia is not prepare well during the in March after the pandemic, the first case reported. We have a problem with the medical protective gear like mask and hand sanitizer, because we know at the time that during the January and February, any big export on related with the protective gear like mask and hand sanitizer to the Hong Kong and China, and that's why after we get the fish virus, we lack the protective equipment, because most of the equipment stock has exported to the foreign country. So that's why media criticize the government. So I will the next step to the what happened to the journalists and media during pandemic. And before we enter to the this situation in the pandemic, I will back to the the brief situation. Press freedom Indonesia, based on if we compare in this region, Southeast Asia, still not the best, but five best in South Asia based on RSF, under Timor-Leste and Malaysia for this year, and better from Philippines. But the contradictory reality in Indonesia, and I think also in Philippines, we categorize as a more democratic country, but we see another fact that make me worry. We also have experience with the attack against journalists quite high compared with the other countries that categorize less democratic country compared with Indonesia and Philippines. Yeah. So I think Indonesia and we have a more similar experience related with the press freedom, but Philippines I think more deadly than Indonesia. And what makes us worry about the number of violent case against journalists? You can see in the table the number of case against the violent case against journalists in average above the 40 case, and the case of violent case against journalists for this year, based on AJI Indonesia estimation, will above the 60 case, because the big supplier of this case coming from the protest against the omnibus law. During the protest, journalists become a victim of violence, all from the police. During the October, at least any 53 violent case against journalists, usually mostly physical attack. But the number of case journalists, the numbers of violent case still high. But what makes us worry is about the increase of the digital attack against journalists. So,
Abdul-san, for your presentation, 5 minutes left.
Okay, I will try to present fast. The first case of the digital attack happened in 2017. This is a journalist from Top Score make criticize to the religious figure, and after this critic, he became a victim of the abuse in social media. And in the next year, something similar happened again. At least 3 journalists become a victim of digital attack because they criticize the religious figure, especially you can see in the picture from Front Pembela Islam, defender of Front of Islam Defender, and this is in the happened in 2017 and 2018. Digital attack continue in the next in 2019. This is related with the Tempo coverage about Jokowi policy related with the anti-corruption policy. We we see that Jokowi's lie about his commitment to combat corruption, because he support the move by politicians, especially in House of Representatives, to revise the anti-corruption law. That we see this law is weaken the anti-corruption movement in Indonesia, and Tempo and get hit back from Jokowi supporter. They make campaign to uninstall Tempo. So this move make the rate of Tempo application in Play Store decrease from 4 to 1 rate. Then the same kind of attack happened again, especially during pandemic. So the first case is happened to the T.com after he read a story about Jokowi make official opening of the mall in Bekasi, and the journalists get digital attack from doxing in social media, and he also get death threat because they're reporting. And the second case in this year, any hacking and intrusion to the at least to media newsroom, Tempo.co and Tirto ID. In case of Tempo, the hacker tried to shut down their their situs but not succeed. But they succeed to deface the front page. And on Tirto ID case, the hacker tried to delete some article and recover by the Tirto ID sooner after the attack. So this is this at least based on our monitoring, the digital attack again journalists and media is not remote event, yeah, because we see more similar situation happen to the civil society, and I think it's related with the policy of the government in general. They tend to not happy with the criticize to the government. As we know, not long after the Indonesian government declared the first case of the pandemic, National Police released the decree that they will punish people who insult the president related with the pandemic. Okay.
Your presentation time is up.
Okay, so that's why we see this even as not it's part of the signal of diminishing freedom, and also a symptom of democratic decline in Indonesian government under Jokowi presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdul-san. So a lot of scholars working on Indonesian politics are talking about the decline of democracy. Your talk is also closely related to the decline of democracy in Indonesia. It's a very sad story, but anyway, I'll ask, thank you very much, Abdul-san, for your talk, and I'll ask Kawamura-san to make a response to his talk. And Kawamura-san is from IDE, Institute of Developing Economies, and he's a specialist in Indonesian politics. So please, Kawamura-san.
Yeah, thank you very much, Okamoto-san, and thank you very much for Papa Abdul Manang. I'm very happy to participate in this seminar, and I have enjoyed reading your paper. But Manan's presentation is very good overview of the difficulties the journalists in Indonesia and the media of Indonesia have faced in the era of coronavirus pandemic and digitalization and polarization. From his presentation, we can find the different kinds of harassment experienced by the journalists and the media institutions in Indonesia. Firstly, there are many forms of harassment, ranging from physical attacks, threats, judicial charges, to hacking of personal social media accounts, institutional websites, and spreading personal misinformation, and so on. Secondly, tools of harassment are also very various, from physical to digital. And thirdly, sources of harassment are also different. They are not only the military, police, and governmental authorities, but also social organizations like religious groups, and also pro-governmental social groups. And in his presentation, he points out the number of harassment against journalists has increased, especially since 2016. And the first case of the digital attack began in 2017. And these 2 years are quite important turning point of the current Indonesian political development. In fact, many of academic Indonesian scholars began to discuss about deterioration of democracy in Indonesia in these years. Since in these 2 years, the Chinese Christian incumbent Jakarta governor failed to win the election, mainly due to the blasphemy charges and massive demonstrations mobilized by the conservative Islamic groups. Following these political developments, we also find digital harassment on a large scale at the 2019 presidential election from both sides of the incumbent President Jokowi side, and also the competing Prabowo side. And since then, the government has been aggressively using digital tools to censor and oppress the opposite. In this sense, I totally agree with Pak Manan's statement in his paper that digital attacks on journalists, media, and civil society are not only a signal of diminishing freedom, but also a symptom of democratic decline.
Kamura sensei, 1 minute left.
Right. And I think it is not exaggeration. And similar to the Philippine case, this trend began before the COVID-19 pandemic began. And it can be said that the digital harassment against journalists and democratic regression has been accelerated under the pandemic, this pandemic. And at the end of my discussion, I want to point out 2 remaining questions. 2 remaining questions. We both scholars, journalists, and other practitioners who are concerned about Indonesia should try to find out answers. Firstly, what has happened to Jokowi? President Jokowi won the 2014 presidential election against the ex-military officer Prabowo with support from civil society organization. And his election was welcomed as a sign of strength of the Indonesian democracy. However, under the Jokowi administration, we observed a gradual regression of Indonesian democracy and the rise of illiberalism. So why does Jokowi ignore the principle of democratic values, such as freedom of expression, freedom of press, and freedom of association against our expectations?
Kamura sensei, time is up.
This is final question. Second, why do the Indonesian people still support Jokowi? Despite the regression of liberal democracy and despite the inadequate response against COVID-19 pandemic, the approval rate for Jokowi at poll surveys is still high, with around 60%. This fact similar to high support to the Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. So to confront these elected autocrats or elected authoritarians, we have to understand the reason why and under what conditions the people support them. Thank you very much. And this is all my comment.
Oh, Kamura-sensei, thank you very much for interesting comments and the questions. I'm eager to listen to the responses from the Kamura-san 2 questions by Abdul Manan, but also Abdul Manan-san, please answer the question later during the general sessions. So Kamura-san, thank you very much for your comments. So now we move on to the final session. The final session is on Thailand. And the speaker is Pravit San from Kaosut newspaper, online newspaper. And he is quite busy, but we are lucky to have him in this symposium. So now I'll ask Pravit San to give a talk. So Ajahn Pravit, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to fully participate in the preparations of today's events on some of the things. But again, I'm delighted to be here to just give you a very brief talk about the situation here in Thailand. Again, we heard a few other speakers talking about the cases in some countries, and maybe I'll just start by citing, say, our colleagues from the Philippines cited that the number of new cases per day now stands somewhere around less than 2,000 new infections per day. While in Japan, I heard that just yesterday or 2 days ago, for the first time, the number of the newly infected reached 800. Okay, now compare that to Thailand. We are going through another rough patch after a very long, quiet, very low infection rate. And the latest one, which is troubling the Thai public, we're talking about a number of 12 new infection cases. Okay, I repeat the word 12, 1, 2. And let's start from there. The total, while in Japan, for example, and I'm citing the information dated, let's say on December 10, which is just less than 10 days ago, and that's when my report was submitted, the paper. Japan has a total infections of 163,929. Okay, so 163K. The Philippines, for example, is 444. Okay, the number of deaths, Japan is 2,382 as of December 10. And the Philippines, for example, it's 8,677. And for Thailand, it's so far only 60 deaths. Okay, and my commentator will later ask if that stat is reliable, but that's what we have, 60 deaths compared to 8,600 in the Philippines and 2,300 plus in Japan, for example. And a total infections of only, and I use the word only because I want to stress this whole point about the dominations of the Thai government's narratives on what's happening in Thailand. Only 4,151 total infections over the past 4 months. And out of that number, 3,880 have already recovered. Okay, and where does Thailand stand? I would start by talking about the fact that the government's dominations of the narrative and discourse about how the people, both the government and the public, should deal with COVID-19 has partly to do with a fact that it has become almost a competitive sport. Okay, just showing you a newspaper. This is the Bangkok Post on that edition, December 10, and you could see a long table. And Thailand list at the end is ranked at number 151. Okay, 151 out of nearly 200 nations, 190 plus on Earth. Japan is ranked as 46. So of course, the lower the ranking, the worse the situation. The Philippines ranked at 27. And of course, we all can guess that the United States is ranked at #1, okay, with 15 million infections and deaths already surpassing 300,000 mark. So strangely, the Thai government has managed to capitalize and dominate the discourse, which began, of course, with the severe fear that we been watching it unrolled from Wuhan and spread all over Asia. So from a very first rough start, the Thai government have managed to dominate the discourse that people have to listen to the government and fully cooperate, and that includes the mandatory wearing of sanitary masks, the maintaining of distance, social distancing, and for our time, earlier this year, there was a curfew late at night, but there was never any major movement or group questionings the virtue of, say, the wearing of sanitary masks or maintaining social distancing, or worse, the shutting down of the airspace. Thailand has been in a virtual near total isolation for the past 10 months. And that is something very unique or bizarre, because last year we had nearly 40 million foreign tourists. And this year, the number of tourists has fallen by more than 99%, of course, because anyone who wants to come to Thailand either needs a special, medical certificates. And even if you want to come here as a tourist or as a visitor, you have to be here and put under either a state quarantine or an alternative quarantine system that would last 14 days. Okay, so we're talking about 14 days. And who's going to come to Thailand to spend the first 14 days in either a hotel that would just keep you remanded in there for 2 weeks before you will be able to travel? And even with that, currently the government, after reintroducing a relaxations of the number of people allowing to visit Thailand from abroad, the number of foreign visitor is still limited at 1,200 people per month. Okay, and as you hear me, the government is still unable to really conclude if they will finally reduce the number of the mandatory quarantine for foreign visitor and Thai visitors from abroad to 10 days from the existing 14. So how this started? It started with the government taking a very strong initiative early on to set up a special, what we call a COVID-19 situations administration. And on that very top of the new organizations, which pull in resources from various ministries, was a very charismatic spokesman by the name of Tawisin Wisanuyotin. And Tawisin is a trained psychiatrist. So he's very good at dealing with the public. And he appeared on televised TV, nationwide televised TV every day at around 11:30 a.m., just before noon. And people were just fixated watching the news about the latest number of infections, the tracing of the few who have been infected on a daily basis. In Thailand, we talk about less than 10 new infections. And until just 10 days ago, for many months, zero local, infections that were not coming from abroad, okay? And something is changing just over the past 3 days, but I'll touch that at the end. So you could see a very smooth talking, good looking psychiatrist trying to warn the people. And by trying to convince the Thai public, Tawisin chiefly used comparative statistics, as if we are competing in some kind of Olympic, saying Thailand has to compete. We have to, keep our heads above the water, keep the infections away. And of course, this explains why, you know, on a daily basis, we would hear, if you watch television, at least over the first 6 months of the report, you know, of the daily report, comparing the stats of Thailand to that of other countries, Japan, the Philippines, Italy, France, Singapore, Myanmar, or Cambodia, and of course, Thailand is standing at the very top, you know, and people have become proud of it. It perversely turned into a cause or a project for national pride. And let me just read this commentary from the Bangkok Post, which is one of the major newspaper here, and it's in English, so I don't need to translate. We don't need to debate about that. So up until about 10 days ago, or 2 weeks ago, there'd been a medical profession was infected because they were not cautious enough when handling the alternative quarantine. What do you mean by alternative mandatory quarantine? If you're rich enough, you can choose, and you're foreigner or Thai, you can choose to be lodged in a very nice hospital or very nice hotel, and there will be medical people who come and check you for that duration of 14 days to make sure that you will probably not be infected before you will be released to the public here in Thailand. So the title of this this editorial, and I will just read part of it, is "Pride Can Lead to a Fall." Okay, this is the December 12th, or just a week ago, last Saturday, editorial on the Bangkok Post. And I start the quotations. Over the past several months, Thailand has taken pride, too much pride, in its impressive track record in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic with zero local transmission. Okay, I stress on the word zero local transmission. That pride finally led to complacency, not only amongst the general public, but the health authority as well. With their complacencies, there has emerged what looks like an infection cluster at B&H Hospital, where 6 nurses tested positive. According to the news report, one nurse started or contracted the coronavirus while tending to travelers in alternative states quarantine at hotels in Bangkok. The virus quickly spread to her colleagues. It is the first local infections case involving medical workers who, during the past 10 months, have taken care of 172,000 people in quarantine facilities. Okay, so that's how they frame. Okay, the Bangkok Post, for example, framed it. But just wait, I'm going to read more. The same editorial mentioned that the short travel agreement between Singapore and Hong Kong bursted off just a few days after it was recently introduced. And at the end, the Bangkok Post concluded that Thailand cannot cling on to its accomplishments. Now it's time for another war. Only when the pandemic is beaten once and for all can Thailand afford to pat itself on the back and be proud. So there's this elements of national pride, but on top of that, there's also another disparity that I would like to just mention. The fact that we're dealing with something very technical, we're talking about a pandemic. Of course, the Thai journalists are not trained virologists, and I'm not trained in medical science. We, unlike in a more advanced country like the United States, they have some journalists who are trained as medical professions, or they have a very thorough understanding of medicines. So the ability of the public to, at the same time, questions the merits of the government, okay, fill up with trained medical professional is very low, okay? And on top of that, yes, I have 1 minute. And on top of that, the Thai medical professions are normally amongst those who are best trained and brightest. You know, only the best trained and brightest entered the professions, and because of that, people trusted that the COVID-19 center set by the government filled mostly with medical professionals can be trusted, and that's the irony. So there have never been an alternative questionings of whether what Thailand is doing is the best. Are we becoming too paranoid, too strict to the point of economic ruin? Because as I said, we have nearly 40 million tourists last year, and the number have plunged by 99%. We have nearly 0 foreign tourists now, and the economy is suffering immensely. So I'll end my brief talk here, and you could look at my paper, and I'll let Eduardo, the commentator, take over. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you very much for very exciting talks about the situation in Thailand and dominating narratives by the state on the COVID-19 situation. It's very exciting. So now I'll ask Edward Siani-san to make a response. And actually, the Japan Society for Southeast Asian Studies has a lot of specialists on Thai politics, and Thai economy, and Thai ecology. But today, in order to add some different nuances, so we would like to invite a scholar from Italy, Edward Siani-san. He's working on Thai from the anthropological perspective, and he is now Italy, so it's early morning, but he woke up and he will give comments to his private talk. So please.
Yes, thank you, Okamoto-san, and thank you, Prawit, for a very interesting and powerful presentation. So let me just start with the numbers that you raised. 12 infections, I think you said at the moment, 60 dead. I mean, where I am now, just to put things in perspective, I'm in Venice now, and in the province of Venice, I think just 2-3 days ago, over 48 hours, there were 40 and something dead. Right, just to put things into perspective. So what is striking to me, there was a comment before in the chat session. Someone was saying Thailand is another reality. So, you know, this is indeed the impression that one gets, right? Thailand is always another world. And the idea that Thailand is another world, of course, is very familiar to anybody working on Thailand, because Thailand has long taking enormous pride in its supposed uniqueness, right? Which, as we know, this narrative of uniqueness is perhaps built on the idea that Thailand has never been colonized, and the pride in our special culture, in our kings, etc., etc. So, you know, it's interesting. It seems to me to really almost be a continuation of this existing narrative that is very well known and that is quite distinctive of Thailand. So question, this narrative that you say a lot of newspapers have not questioned is a narrative of success. So to what degree are these numbers reliable? You know, really simple question that comes from anybody who's not there. I remember back in, well, early during the crisis, maybe February or March, there was a Phuket newspaper that was reporting that a doctor there at the hospital suggested that they could not issue the figures directly. Any figure had to go through the government. So I thought, that's suspicious. And then I'm not aware of any journalists having followed that up. So that would be one question, right? To what degree do you think that the numbers are reliable? Second question, I think that your description of an uncritical portrayal of the COVID crisis concerns only some media. Maybe the more mainstream ones, I don't know, I'll let you say something about this. But journalists such as yourself actually have been quite critical. I remember, again, early in the crisis, February, March, some journalists were critical of the government not closing the borders to tourists from China. Now, more recently, journalists such as yourself have been critical of the government, of their refusal not to lift the state of emergency. Right. So, you know, I think that actually there has been some criticism here and there. So I would ask you maybe to identify more clearly what media has not been critical, and perhaps if you have time for this, to explore the dynamics as to why certain media would be uncritical. Final question. I agree with you that there are enormous human rights issues in Thailand and under the current government. I also agree with you that the current government has tried to instrumentalize COVID, for example, to suppress the current student protests. They did this successfully actually in March by declaring the state of emergency that stopped, that brought an end to a first wave of protests. But now, although there is a state of emergency, they're not really using it. They're not really invoking the state of emergency, or at least they're not exploiting it to the best. Instead, they're using they're invoking other laws which are far more borderline, far more problematic from a human rights perspective, such as lèse-majesté, such as sedition. So my question would be, in your opinion, why is the government not doing more with this COVID situation, which would be quite, I think would be quite easy in terms of narrative from an international, maybe even from the human rights perspective? I'll end there. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Edwardson from Italy, for very important 3 questions on the situation in Thailand. Okay, now we would like to take a break for 5 minutes. So we'd like to start this session or question and answer session from 3:30 in Japanese time. And if you have questions, please send the question to Q&A chat. Okay, now we'll take a break for 5 minutes. And the speakers, please prepare for your response. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. We've just had a very short break. I hope everybody is still here. What I would like to do now is we will have a question and answer session. Now, we kind of rushed the session to make sure that we stick to the schedule, because there will also be another session after this one closes today for the members of the society. But time permitting now, what I would like to do is to go back to Marites and to pick up on some of the questions that we didn't have time to answer. So if we can maybe, what I will do now is I will go back to each of the speakers one by one. And if you could answer the questions which were put to you by your commentator, we would appreciate it very much. We are also accepting questions from the members who are still with us, the attendees. So if anybody has a question, you can use the Q&A function to put them forward. We have one here, which if we have time, we will go to. Okay, so we will go first of all back to Marites, and then I will move forward. Thank you.
Hi, Mario. I think I was able to answer some of the questions of Sensei Seki.
Okay.
I think it's the second, Malaysia and the rest.
Okay, in that case, thank you that's very courteous of you, Marites. Thank you so much. So in that case, then we will move forward to today's second speaker then. So would it be possible to ask Tashni to respond to some of these questions?
Hello, hi. Okay, so I'm just going to go over, do you want to pull up the questions or?
Give me a moment and I will do so, if you bear with me.
Or do you think we don't need to? I can just read them, okay.
Just bear with me, okay.
I can just read them out if you prefer as well, yeah?
Okay.
Okay, I'll do that then. Oh, there we are. Okay, great. Okay. Can I foresee a change in Malaysia? I assume this refers specifically to protection by the state. So there have been some movements towards this, like recently PPE, a rubber glove factory, was found to have housed its migrant worker staff in very poorly kit out dormitories. And the Human Resource Minister has said that, these conditions are deplorable. I'm going to look into it, and I'm going to investigate other employees who do the same thing, employers who do the same thing. Now, whether or not this translates into boots on the ground and the Labor Department carrying out investigations, it's too soon to say. Malaysia's track record doesn't give me a lot of hope. I'll be very frank. I think that any change that happens will be quite slow. And the main reason for that isn't actually even the pandemic. It's the fact that we are looking at an administration that has a very thin majority in parliament right now. And the concerns will be focused more on that rather than matters of policy. So politics over policy, if that answers the question. Can we go to the next slide, please? Ooh, is that? Okay, so, so is there a wider space for an innovative approach to challenge the dominant discourse, and what is the role of media? I think this is the last question, but I'll take it. I'll do this one first. So or is it the second question? Sorry, I'm all over the place today. Yes, it is the second question. I think this dominant discourse of migrants as criminal or women migrant workers as sort of licentious is of course not rooted in fact at all. And it falls upon the media to challenge this through articles that don't just look at sort of the oppression, but also look at the positive and important aspects of having migrant workers without leaning towards, exceptionalism or sort of cheesy headlines. But what media's role in this is to, I think, be extremely critical of stereotypes, of prejudices, and not shy away from challenging these when they are aired in public discourse. That would be my take on it. Whether or not there is a wider space for this, I don't know. There was a recent hashtag going around social media. It's still going on, Migrant Juga Manusia, which means migrants are also people. And that again gathered a lot of steam. A lot of people are still using it. And I think there's definitely more attention paid on the role migrants play in building and shaping a society. But we also have to be wary of falling into the trap where we connect someone's value as a person, their personhood, with their capitalistic utility. So the media has to avoid that trap. Okay, we can go to the next one, please, which is something about media check. Yes, can the media and civil society check the state's abuse of power? So this, to me, I think depends on how you report, your strategy for both civil society and the media, and sort of your methods. So right now we have the strongest opposition force we've had in Malaysia's history, right? And that lends, of course, a lot of strength and credibility to civil society and to media who want to do balanced reporting, because it is pretty much 50-50, 49-51. So this is where we have like sort of an ace up our sleeves. But the media also has to keep reporting facts very strictly and figure out a way around limited access. For example, we're not, foreign media are not in several key government WhatsApp channels. We're not often invited to official functions that are like for state broadcasters or state outlets. So that is a challenge when it comes to checking any sort of abuses of power that may or may not occur. So I don't want to presuppose that there is an abuse of power, but I think media needs to be given the space to address it if this does happen or this does worsen. Yeah, so any role or responsibility the media takes on has to be very, very firmly rooted in fact. Because if truly these abuses are taking place, it shouldn't be difficult to expand upon. Okay, I'm done. If anyone wants me to build or clarify.
Okay, thank you, Tashni. Thank you very much for your detailed responses to the questions from the commentator. And just so that we have time to be able to respond to other questions, if you don't mind, I will move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yini, are you there? If possible, maybe we can go over some of the issues which Professor Nakanishi raised. I pass over to you now.
Yes, I will take Mr. Yushi question too. And also I have another questions on Q&A. So I will take both questions. Can I see the question from the Mr. Yushi?
Okay, Nakanishi-san, can you share your questions again, please?
Okay. Please wait, I already closed my PowerPoint. So Koyeni, you can answer to the...
Please read your sentence.
No, you can answer to the question from the, the participant,
okay.
which is inside Q&A first, then
yes,
you can move to my question.
Okay. So one of the attendees asked me a question. I would like to read the question first. The Aung San Suu Kyi administration seems to be getting more and more authoritative for foreigner side, yet it is surprising to see she got bigger support in recent election than the previous one, despite the pandemic. Can you give us any idea to understand Aung San Suu Kyi popularity in relationship with the COVID-19 situation in Myanmar? Or put another way, how has COVID-19 affected Aung San Suu Kyi popularity? The answer is yeah. The voters in Myanmar has no choice. Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD is only way to move ahead in terms of democratization. For example, within the 5 years, Aung San Suu Kyi government invests in the health sector more and more. And that kind of investment in the health sectors we never seen before. You can imagine that how bad it is. Public
Rate of reporting on the military
under the previous military governments. Now situation is a lot better, and in terms of policy, I think that health minister trying to trying to push expanding the boundary in terms of no one have left behind. So whoever got the infection of COVID-19, you can be treated for free in a state quarantine and in a hospital. It's everything is free. So that's a kind of sounds like universal medical plan is running here. But in term of course this is a first time the Burmese population see the public health sector is getting a better situation. And also meanwhile Aung San Suu Kyi is very clever to exploit the situation. For example, she opened a Facebook account, not only one account. She opened a state councillor account and NLD chairman account, something like that. So whenever she wants to deal with the state councillor position, she used state councillor Facebook account, and when she needs to talk about the election, she used the NLD chairman account. So that she is very knowledgeable how to capitalize using through the social media to not only the state-owned medias. So I think those impacts how to say making more popularity of her performance and the government's performance. So that's why I think that more voters, she gained more voters than the previous governments. So that's my question for the first question.
Okay, Koyeni, actually you answered to my question already. So Mario, you can go to the next one.
Okay,
you want.
Nishi-san, thank you very much. And also thank you, Yini, for responding to this question live. If possible, just so that we make sure that we can get to hear other speakers respond to questions as well. Can I now move over to Abdul Manan? We also had some questions put to you by Professor Kawamura Koichi. Would you be able to respond to some of the questions which were raised?
Okay. Okay, Mario. I will answer a question from Kawamura-san. Okay, the first question, I think, what happened to Jokowi? So this actually need a long answer, but in simple, I think it's a matter about integrity, capability maybe, and also self-interest. As you know, so many Jokowi supporters see him or labeling him as a good man because he look like common people. He's not coming from the family who has history involved in politics. But in my opinion, a good man is not enough to be a good president. You need a strong leadership and clear commitment on some critical issue, especially like human rights issue, freedom, press freedom, and other basic human rights principles. Maybe Jokowi as a personalist maybe is good, but if we talk about the country, it's a very complex factor, yeah, and I think the interest of his inner circle is very strong, and we see the part of the policy Jokowi on his government through her inaugural speech in the last October. We heard in the long speech by Jokowi, he mostly spoke on economic development, national project, and it's very surprising for me. He never spoke, even in one word, about human rights, press freedom, and also fighting against corruption. So I see this is a clear signal for me. I think most civil society activists, this is part of his presidency that we see very poor on human rights commitment. So that's why we're not really surprised if we see what happened during the last year and this year related with the democracy and human rights. And why so many people still supporting him? So maybe some people still see him as look good in public, especially if compared with his rival during his presidential election, yeah, with Prabowo, yeah. And also maybe some people happy with his focus on economy, and also so many people not happy because he to focus on economy, yeah. And I think the best answer for this question is maybe this is the same question we can ask to American people. Why any 74 million people vote for Donald Trump? This is my short answer. Thank you, Mari.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdul, for your responses to Kawamura Sensei's questions. Now, we're running a little bit over time, so I would like to move on to the final speaker. We had some questions from Edo, which were put forward to Pravit. So, Pravit, would you be able to respond to some of these questions which were put forward to you? Thank you.
Thank you. I will very quickly answer the questions by Eduardo Sensei. And he posted 3 questions. First, to what degree is the statistics on the death and number of those infected in Thailand accurate or reliable, and whether it reflects the reality? It's hard to say, because unless you see a massive disposal of body somewhere, there is no, other reason to believe that the number is not accurate, or at least fairly accurate. And just to give you an example, the WHO, the World Health Organization itself, has selected Thailand to be amongst one of the 3 nations for a special documentary on the, good practice or the success in dealing with the COVID-19 a few months ago. So, and secondly, and that goes to the third questions. Okay, and I'll answer it now. The third question is, why did the government not use the COVID-19 related law or the COVID-19 emergency decree, which is still in effect as we speak, to suppress the anti-government / monarchy reform demonstrators, and instead chose to use the word, and I use the word, let me quote the word by Eduardo Sensei himself, and instead use far more ridiculous laws, such as lèse majesté and sedition laws. Again, it also makes sense to deduct that if there was really a widespread case of local infections over the past 3 months, we would have seen the demonstrators being infected, because tens of thousands were on the streets very closely, together with little social distancing, and a good number were not wearing any sanitary mask at one time or the other, myself including, reporting on the scene live. I've been there, and many times I did remove my mask because it's just really uncomfortable to wear the mask all the time, particularly when interviewing. And it just makes no sense, because if some of the, if the COVID-19 is still widely spread locally in Thailand, there must have been some super spreader or cases that could be capitalized by the government, and say, look, we have to ban them from demonstrating in large number because people are now infected amongst the demonstrators. But there was no such case, and it's been more than 4 months now. And that itself means, even though the sedition and lèse majesté laws are ridiculous, I think the government is convinced that they could not convince the public otherwise, that there is a need to stop people from demonstrating simply because of COVID-19. And as we are approaching New Year, the latest measures introduced by the government is that any New Year's gatherings with a crowd of larger than 1,000 persons or people needs a special permit, but that's all. Okay, so lastly, any critical, Eduardo asked if there was any critical criticism from the press. I think I'll have to work harder, but if there's any, it's been subdued by the fear of looking at what is happening in Italy, in the United States, and again, because the Thai journalists they are not virologists, they assume that, wearing masks was really there, what was very, very helpful. And probably just to answer about the uniqueness of Thailand, I don't know if it's just sheer luck, partly because, well, again, like in Japan, but we don't even wear socks. So many Thais would remove their shoes before entering their house or houses, or take showers 2 times a day. I don't know if these are contributing factors to the lowering number of the infections. But last, let me just add one word. Over the past 3 days, there have been a new case of local, or what is believed to be a possible local transmission case in just south of Bangkok in Samut Sakhon, in a province where 60% of the populations there are migrant workers from Myanmar in the fishing and seafood industry. And now we are just learning that the 12 newly infected people reported today are from that area. They work in a shrimp market, and now people are planning the fear, speculating whether actually this local infections was not really local, but infected from a migrant worker from Myanmar who may have evaded the test or quarantine. And there is that possibility of a backlash on the migrant workers in the coming days. So that's my answer.
Pravid, thank you ever so much for responding to these questions. Actually, there's probably a lot more questions that we would like to ask, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. Today, this session is part of an academic meeting which is being held online, and there will be another session which many attendees will be moving over to shortly. As such, we will have to close this session shortly. But before we do close the session, I would like to say thank you to all of the panelists who have participated in this event today. Also, especially, we appreciate it greatly that the commentators also gave their time to comment on the written pieces which each of you submitted to us. All of you articles which you gave to us have been uploaded and available online at CS's homepage. For those of you who are still with us and you would like to go over these are available online. Also, if possible, I'd like to maybe just share a little bit of information before we close this session. As I mentioned at the very beginning, since March, CS was very concerned with how we could show solidarity with our colleagues and our friends, also research colleagues who are based in Southeast Asia. Our center very much lives from actually going to the field and doing research in our respective locations and in our countries that we go to. This year, we haven't been able to go anywhere, and we haven't been able to invite anybody to come here. Hence, we've been doing this online. And I think we're all quite numb from all of these Zoom sessions that we have to do every day. But one of the things that we have tried to do is to share information from the region in English and in Japanese. And if you don't mind me just quickly sharing my screen before I finish, we have set up a website which is called the Corona Chronicles, Voices from the Field. And here we
Mario, your voice is lost.
聞こえますか？
聞こえます。岡本先生の声は聞こえます。
じゃあ、草加さんの方で次の総会の方への挨拶っていうか、どうするかっていうのをちょっと。
じゃあ、このセッション閉じていいんですか？閉じる挨拶はどなたが？
あれ？
岡本先生、マリオさんの話の中盤ぐらいから全然聞こえてなかったんですが、どうしたらいいでしょうか。
こっちで喋った方がいい。いや、はい、どうぞ。
Yes, we can hear you.
聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
すいません。Okay, I will pass over to Kusaka Wataru because we are running out of time and he will now explain a few details relating to the rest of today. Thank you. Kusaka-san, お渡しします。
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation and comments. So now we like to close this symposium title Reporting from the Front Line. No? Thank you so much. I'd like to announce to the member of Japan Society for Southeastern Asian Studies. So speakers, discussants, those who are not member of the society can leave now. You can take rest and relax for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for giving your time for this event. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your contribution. So okay, thank you so much again. それでは東南アジア学会の皆様に次の総会についてアナウンスさせてください。これからですね、15時50分から16時10分まで受付ということなんですけども、4時10分から総会を開始します。こちらの会議を Zoom のウェビナーを退出して、次の、総会に参加される方はミーティングルーム4の方に、移動のほどよろしくお願いいたします。はい。で総会に続きまして、第18回東南アジア史学会授賞記念講演もございます。こちらも、オープンのもの、こちらはオープンのものになっておりますので、こちらにもぜひご参加のほどよろしくお願いいたします。それでは長時間のシンポジウム参加どうもありがとうございました。Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you.
Kusaka-san, thank you very much. Thank you, Marites, Abdul, Tashni-san. Thank you very much for all of you for participating today.
I'll later send emails to the speakers. 終わったときは寂しいよね。
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
これも聞こえてた。
マリオさんがスライドを共有した
高さんどうもありがとうございました。なんか今オフになってるけど、田崎さんもなんかインプレッシブな案内ありがとうございました。
最初時間緩くて
効果的だったと思います。
はい、ありがとうございました。お疲れ様でした。
いや、長時間お疲れ様でした。
田崎さんもみんな聞こえないんですけども、これは
聞こえない。
あれおかしいな。田崎さんの声も聞こえないね。坂さんの声も聞こえない。ミュート外してるけど、まあいいか。
こちらではもう停止、録画とか全部、
坂さん喋ってる今。
喋ってます。
喋ってます。
声聞こえない全然。なんでやろう。ミュートじゃないんですよね。
口パクもしません。
乗せてみて、これ OK ですよ。